Well, good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Ted Caleris, Superintendent for the Brooklyn City School District, and I am honored to have State Representative Chris Glassburn with us today. This is a little bit of a unique format for us. We typically are very student and staff and community based, but this is a great opportunity to get to get to know our outstanding representative that represents Brooklyn. So, welcome, Representative. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and really, I think the first part of this is like to get to know you, like what inspired you to run for office?
So I am in my early 40s. I have a 4-year-old daughter. And earlier in my career, I had worked in the Ohio State House for parts of 10 years, and I saw the impact that the state can make in people's lives for good and for worse. I have worked in other capacities, been budget director for Cuyahoga County, done other things for other municipalities, mostly around government finance. And an opportunity popped up. I was a city councilman in the city of North Olmsted. We had district lines for the state legislature change for the third time in 4 years. And the way that it shook out, I was one of the more senior elected officials in the district by the way this was drawn. And so I got asked by some folks who were in the legislature what I consider coming. Legislature has term limits. So you're only allowed to serve 4 terms of 2 years. So people with experience are kind of rare.
Right.
And so they asked me. It wasn't quite the right time in my life, to be honest. At the time, my daughter was 2. But sometimes you have to take the opportunity that's there, and if you're the right person, you got to step up and you got to be the one to do it.
Well, you've always been outspoken positively for Brooklyn, and we appreciate that. This is not the first time you've been in the district, and that is amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in serving? Like tell us a little bit about your schedule, or just tell us about what it's like to be a state legislator and the things that kind of come at you from a day-to-day basis.
So the state legislature, we have 2-year terms, but it's not quite evenly spaced out. The very first 6 months is the state budget process. Because of my experience, I got put on the budget committee as a freshman, which is very rare, and the Ways and Means committee, which is the committee that does property taxes. Both of those are big deals in terms of managing school budgets. And so I also got put on energy, which, our energy bills have been going through the roof, and was in charge of that for my caucus. So for the first 6 months, I was in Columbus 4 or 5 days a week. That was a little rough for my family.
Sure.
But after that, we're predominantly in Columbus Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
So it's getting back to some of a normal schedule. That's good. What communities do you currently represent? Obviously, Brooklyn.
So as I said, gerrymandering has some unlikely communities together. I represent from the Cleveland Zoo to Olmsted Township, which is more of a congressional district size.
Yeah.
But the specific communities are, I have parts of 5 wards of Cleveland, Lyndale, Brooklyn, Brook Park, Middleburg Heights, North Olmsted, and Olmsted Township.
Wow. That is a span. Wow,
Yes,
absolutely. Yes. How do you find time to stay connected with that large of a geographical space?
I have family that live in Brook Park, and my daughter's friends are in North Olmsted and Olmsted Township, so I'm naturally in those communities. So I make a point of trying to come to Brooklyn, come to Lyndale, come to Cleveland in each of the different parts, and the parts of Cleveland I have aren't connected.
Right.
They're separated by Brooklyn and others.
Oh, wow.
So I really do try to look for community events in Brooklyn. There's been several events that I've come to, and anytime I can make it out, I'll try to.
And you have, and that's been amazing. Let's talk a little bit about. We're in Brooklyn City School District, and let's talk a little bit about public education. I know over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of different topics that have been really on the public school landscape from the state side: vouchers, taxes, levies, things like that. What do you, from your perspective, what do you feel the most important issue in public education is right now?
I mean, you always want to say the quality of the service to the kids in the classroom, but what makes that possible is the money that comes from taxpayers, whether that's from Columbus or locally. And there's been a real shift in the state. Under our state constitution, there's only one thing that we're required to pay for, actually, and this surprises most people, and that's education.
Right.
We have to have a full and thorough education for kids. And so that's been interpreted historically to mean that the state pays half of the share
Right.
statewide. We hit a peak of about 46%. We never quite got to 50 in the last few years. However, there has been a market change, and with inflation, the state has not matched the costs that are rising, and so the state share is dropping from last year at 38% statewide to this year 35, and next year's 32.
Yeah.
And so that eventually money's got to, you either have to cut service or you have to put more money in. And that's in most communities, mature communities like Brooklyn, North Olmsted that I represent, 75-80% of households don't have kids in the school district currently.
And that's a burden on the taxpayers.
And so when you have that conversation with those families that don't have kids, you have to show to them why they should continue making up that difference that the state government is taking away.
Do you have any insight on why the state philosophically has shifted from that 46% state share down to 32-ish% on top of inflation, energy, services have all gone up? Can you fill us into why that shift has happened?
So there's been a belief that Ohio needs to do something to change our economy and change the long-term trend of people moving out of Ohio. Mm-hmm. And in the big picture, I can get behind that.
Yeah.
The way that the legislature has tried to address this problem for going on almost 15 years now is to keep lowering taxes on businesses and on income tax, because they've put forward this idea that if the businesses aren't taxed and if rich people aren't taxed, that they'll come to Ohio and open up their businesses.
Right.
We've been doing it long enough now, though, and I don't mean to get too philosophical here,
yeah,
where we've seen whether that works or not.
Yeah.
And I would say it's whatever benefit it has done, it hasn't done quite enough yet to justify the amount we're spending on it.
Right.
And so we lowered the state income tax again this past year, and that money had to come from somewhere.
Right. That
money that would have paid for the state staying at its share at 40% was used for the income tax cut, and it's a direct link. Yeah. It was about $2 billion of income tax cut for people making over $100,000 instead of funding that 8% between 32 and 40.
Yeah. I know, just some of my neighboring school districts with some of the property tax changes and with some of the legislation that is now impacting how budget commissions operate from a day-to-day basis are beginning to see a struggle in maintaining operating costs. For example, the county budget commission typically did advances on property taxes for school districts. Well, we were just notified at the county level in Cuyahoga County that that's going to stop. Now, it doesn't impact Brooklyn, but I know some of my colleagues in other districts in Cuyahoga County are going to have to really look at some short-term loan processes just to make payroll. And I go back to I'll go back to the state share piece. I know about $1.7 billion has gone to vouchers over the last 2, 3, 4 years, and somewhere we're annually spending at the state share about $1 billion towards vouchers, which is coming on the backs of school districts and public schools. And can you maybe talk a little bit about and again, I'm not here to bash vouchers by any means. I'm really not, but I know that this is like you said, there's a finance piece here. Can you maybe explain from what you've heard at the state legislator side about why vouchers have become a priority for our state legislators?
So there's different kinds of schools that receive these vouchers. Some of these schools are religious, some of them are nonprofits, some of them are for-profits that are trying to compete to be public schools in effect. The idea, the positive spin idea has been that competition is a good thing and improves quality. The problem with that is if you need a road that goes from say Ridge Road to Tiedemann, you don't build two roads, you build Biddulph.
Right.
It's expensive to build two roads. And so we have built schools, we have built a system to pay for one school district, to pay for a public education for everybody. And that school has to exist. It has to be ready to serve all the kids, whether they show up or not. And so when you build a second system.
And I can't say we're full.
Correct.
Right. Like, that's the thing. Like, if somebody moves into the city of Brooklyn, they want to attend our district, we will obviously lovingly take them, but I can't say, sorry, we're full in X grade level, you can't come here. We have that burden no matter what. Our private schools do not have that burden.
Well, we've also seen in places like Columbus especially, but also in the Cleveland area, sometimes these experiments succeed and they're decent schools, and sometimes they fail.
Right.
And so there have been school districts or these charter schools that receive vouchers that have closed in the middle of the school year.
Yeah.
And the school district that are just sent 200 kids in the middle of December and said, good luck.
Right.
So it's, again, it started as an experiment of sorts in the city of Cleveland 20 some years ago.
Sure.
As a way to try to create some kind of competition, but it's grown into the latest round of expansion wasn't moving kids again from public schools to private schools. It was increasing support to families that were already sending their kids to private schools. Only 4% of the kids that got the latest expansion of these vouchers were attending public schools prior.
Yeah.
And so that says to me a couple of things. One is that the public schools are doing a pretty good job. They're winning the competition, if you speak.
Sure.
Because the kids aren't and the families aren't choosing to leave. But secondly, that normally in government, whether you're talking about trying to create jobs or help families out, you don't give an incentive for an activity that's already happening. You give a business a grant to open up in a building maybe that's 50 years old and nobody is buying. You try to incentivize something to change. You don't pay for something that's already happening. But that money has to come from somewhere.
Right.
The state cuts its revenue to pay for these income tax cuts for, again, the wealthier folks. I own my own private business. I functionally don't pay property. I don't pay any taxes on it in the state of Ohio, and my business is a one-person business. It doesn't make sense for me to hire a second employee, but I'm still getting a tax advantage. Right. I'm being incentivized to do something that doesn't make sense for my business to do.
Right.
So we're doing a lot of that at the state level, and the money has to come from somewhere, and so that the last bucket filled sometimes appears to be public education. And for those who care about public education, that's a real bummer. But it's a much bigger deal even to those who don't have the kids. Getting back to those 75 or 80% of families that don't have kids, they have to pay the difference. And so when you do an income tax cut for people making $100,000 or more, only 9% of Ohioans make more than $100,000. And so by definition, especially a community like Brooklyn that is more of a middle-class community, at least 90% or more of the residents lose in that trade.
Yeah. I will say too, and you know this, Brooklyn has always, as a community, from our council to our mayors, have always been supportive of the school district, and as a superintendent of schools, I'm very fortunate to be part of a district where the community is so supportive. And however, we still are in a position where we have some upcoming renewal levies, which renewal levies are no new taxes that we're still dependent on as a school district just to maintain the services that we continue. Can you talk a little bit? I don't want to dive too, but can you talk a little bit about the philosophy on the changes to some of the levy rules, like from no continuing, like what it really has done from a school district standpoint. Again, not Brooklyn right now, but our other neighboring districts. It's limited the type of levy options that districts can go to the voters with. Can you talk a little bit about why there's been a push to limit our options as school districts?
So it's a nuanced issue that's hard not to dive in deeper in order to explain. But the shortest I can say is that Ohio has about 600 school districts, and we have a requirement in our state law that school districts collect 2%, or what's called 20 mils of property tax to fund our schools. And not by population, but the 500 of the 600 some school districts were getting close to being at that 2% minimum.
Yeah.
And so when property values went up, because 2% is 2% of the value, if the house value went up 40%, then the property tax bill also went up 40%.
Right.
Most schools, most communities chose not to turn that money back, and their taxpayers got real upset.
Yeah.
And so there was some fair outrage. There is some fair outrage in those communities of saying, I didn't vote for this increase.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so some of the different types of levies that you talked about would exempt themselves out of being counted towards that 2%.
Yeah.
And so some school districts, in the words of my colleagues, had gamed the system in their view of that they were trying to stay artificially at that minimum.
Gotcha.
Look, the bottom line is the school funding system has been overly complicated and used terminology that voters didn't understand. But that is a byproduct of, again, the state making this a lot more harder than it needs to be by not providing funds and by providing these different options that didn't really serve schools or voters. I think that if we got to, again, a system statewide of the state maintaining its commitment, not giving away this money for schools to other things, that both our property taxpayers and the schools would come out far ahead. This wouldn't be nearly as complicated. There would be a system where people would understand when their property taxes are going to go up, and if there's an expansion, they would be voting for it.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about maybe the governor's race and bring it back to kind of what's coming down the road. Like we're walking into a budget year come this fall. We have the governor's race coming in November. Do you see, what do you anticipate the impact on public education, especially public funding of education, will have with the outcome of the governor's race? What kind of impact do you anticipate?
So we're recording this on a Wednesday in late April. The next day after we're recording this, there's going to be an announcement by this group that is petitioning to eliminate all property taxes without any qualification,
right,
and it to start the next year. We'll see what they announce, but if that is on the ballot, I think it's going to be very tempting for voters to vote yes on that,
right,
and eliminate property taxes. Whether you're talking about local schools or the state itself, there's really only three meaningful buckets of tax money. There's income tax, which is off of how much you make, sales tax, which is an added tax on when you buy something at the store, and property tax. And so if you eliminate property tax, that leaves you only the two first buckets, sales and income. our sales tax in Ohio is higher than most other surrounding states. And so we don't think about this as much in the Cleveland area.
Right.
But in Youngstown or Toledo or Cincinnati or Marietta, other places that border, if you have the tax way higher there, those people are going to go shop in Kentucky and Indiana and Michigan and Pennsylvania,
Right.
and you're not going to generate any more tax revenue.
But if we eliminate, if property taxes are eliminated, not only does it impact school districts, doesn't it impact city services also?
Cities are, especially the city of Brooklyn, uniquely, are much more susceptible to property tax than most people realize. And so, yeah, I mean, we could have, starting in January, a catastrophic reorganization of government, because property taxes raises about $30 billion statewide. The other two taxes combined raise about $25 billion. You're eliminating half of the funding for all government at all levels.
Right.
I mean, this is a
big deal.
This is a very big deal.
Right.
And so your original question was, what's going on with the governor's race?
Right.
Well, regardless of who's the governor, if that is what is happening, we're going to have a radical change day one in how local and state government happens. And of those two candidates, or the leading two candidates right now, the Democratic candidate Acton has been more of what you would consider a traditional approach of, she wants to work towards the 50% funding that I've talked about. I will just say I'm of the same party as her, but I think it's more coincidence than not that we're similar views on that. Our current governor, Mike DeWine, is the opposite party. He's a Republican. He's been more or less of the view of, he wants to look out for the welfare of kids, and he wants to keep the funding partnership.
He has, yeah.
But he is term limited, and so the people who are running to replace him, there's three people in the Republican primary. The most likely appears to be Vivek Ramaswamy, has talked about rolling property taxes back to their values 7 years ago, which is 2019, which is would be something on the order, depending on the community, of a 30 to 40% cut overnight. Even if this property tax, abolishment doesn't
if the
happen.
amendment passes,
Well, his point is moot.
his point is mute. And I guess my follow-up then is there I live in a world of preparing, preparing for option A or B. Has there been any talk at the state level to terms of, okay, if this amendment passes to abolish property taxes, has there been any what does that really look like from a real life standpoint? Are they prepared?
So, I mean, I can tell you it's something I've thought about.
Yeah.
I know some of my majority party colleagues have thought about, but their public position has been that if we offer a plan to how to deal with this, that people will do it.
Yeah, I got you.
And I don't really agree with that.
Sure.
I think you should tell people, if you think, just like you would tell your kids, you could stay out all night and
right.
But we're going to church at 7 a.m.
Sure.
Or we're going to you're going, I'm going to work at 7 a.m. or
Right.
whatever. I don't think you just say, go staying out, it's a bad idea, and don't walk people through what the consequences are.
Yeah. Okay, fair. So from one of the things I've been hearing in my circles as superintendent is a little bit of a talk about consolidation of school districts, taking smaller districts and combining them either together or with other larger school districts. Brooklyn City Schools is a little bit shy, less of 1,400 students. So we are considered a smaller district compared to my neighbors in Cleveland, Parma, and some of the other suburban school districts. That's a concern for me, right? Because I know Brooklyn, the community of Brooklyn is proud of their school district, proud of their city, and really this goes against the kind of the philosophy over the last 30, 40 years of local control, whether it's city services or whether it's your school district local control. Can you talk a little bit about the consolidation rumor, so to speak? Is that, does it have traction? Is this not true? Like, what does that mean for districts maybe coming down the road like Brooklyn, who may be around the smaller side?
So I'll answer that probably too long in three different ways. The first of which is, right now, there's nothing stopping cities or schools from consolidating or from doing it without having to fully merge, doing shared services. And there are a lot of services that are shared.
Right.
The Caleris School District, for example, that is our vocational, North Olmsted, Brooklyn are in together. None of the school districts individually could offer as robust a service for vocational
That's a
education.
consolidation of services right there.
Right. And so a lot of the things that make the most sense have already been done, in that is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And so there are a handful of other things. A bill that I'm working on is to try to allow cities and school districts to be able to buy into the state's health insurance plan, because we have a larger and statewide network. And I'm hopeful that that could save somewhere on the order of 15% of healthcare costs. And healthcare is the thing that has gone up the most of any individual expense on a percentage basis. But aside from healthcare, again, you're really getting to very few things that a merger would help with. You might be able to share an HR person. You might be able to share a little bit here or there.
Superintendents. Maybe.
But you're not talking, it's still going to be that same ratio of, 25 kids a teacher, or the different numbers for the lower levels. Elementary, it's a smaller ratio. So if that's where Brooklyn is today, where's the opportunity? My home community of North Olmsted had a peak of 8,000 students, now closer to 4,000. And so you might think, oh, there's room that North Olmsted could absorb another community. That was true for a time.
Yeah.
But the policy of the state has been, we're only going to allow you to rebuild schools for the size of the community that you have. Sounds sensible on its face. But what that means is North Olmsted has consolidated 6 elementary schools into one, and has built a new it's not that new now, it's 10 years old, but built a new high school for the students they had. Yeah. And so North Olmsted's no longer in a position to absorb perhaps a neighbor like Fairview or Olmsted Falls districts. And so if we want as a state to incentivize communities working together or mergers, that's not a 1 month conversation. That's not a 3 month conversation. That's not a 5 hearings in a committee room in Columbus conversation.
It's a lot of work.
That is a generational decision.
Yes.
And that work has not been done. And so the last way I would answer this question is to say, some of these ideas, they say nothing is new or everything's been done before in some form or fashion. And this is one of those areas. When I was towards the end of my career working in Columbus, Governor John Kasich came into office, and he had the theory of, if I cut, this was mostly on the city's side, but if I cut cities in half the funding and I give that money instead as a bonus to communities if they merge, they'll all become more efficient and merge. And what ended up happening is none of the communities merged.
Right.
Because again, the parts that had already made sense had mostly happened.
Yeah.
And so the mergers, it sounds nice, but until you walk through and say, do we have room? Do we have extra staff? You operate in a budget. You're trying to be prudent for your taxpayers here in Brooklyn.
Right.
I don't think you have an extra 80 teachers sitting around to absorb half of the schools on the west side of Cleveland or Parma.
From a standpoint of how we operate, we look at every addition, every retirement with a kind of that microscopic lens to say, okay, do I need this program? Do I need this teacher? Are we going to replace? And you always want to look at that without having to make substantial cuts. But our budget process in this school district is purposeful, that we look at our budget on a month-to-month basis, tracking our finances, and as we go into planning for the next school year, we look at staffing. Is this position necessary? What can we do to either enhance programming or cut some costs? So you're right. I don't have room for another 800 students. And here's the thing. I appreciate you being here and you having, that approach. And I would say to any legislator, go to your school district, walk around like you did today, and see what's going on. I mean, because there are many amazing things going on in all of our school districts, both public and private, that benefit our kids on a daily basis. I always want to be a partner to our state, and I always want to try to bridge that gap of understanding what can people like me in my role, or districts like us, I'm the superintendent, what can I do to help bridge some of that gap with all of our legislators, to get them to see all the positive things we have going on in the school district?
It always takes to make a conversation work. You can talk at somebody and you can have the most creative, arguments ready, but if they're not ready to listen, they're not ready to listen. I guess what I would say is you just keep maintaining your commitment to your community, and you keep being honest about what the problems that you face. Again, it's when one of the things of the school funding plan that was great beyond that, it funded 46%, was getting close to that 50 number, and that was some property tax relief. But part of what made that system work was we quantified for the first time in a meaningful way what it cost to educate kids, and what each component cost. And when you looked under the hood under that, again, the cost that was going up by 20% was not salaries for staff, it was healthcare costs.
Yeah.
And so to me, that was the most informative thing to say, well, I need to look at, is there anything we can do at the state level to help with healthcare costs? Right. And, by and large, we can't change that inflation is going up in the healthcare arena, but we can share our purchasing power. That's something we could do. And so, again, being honest about the challenges you face, even if you don't have the answers, I think is helpful to know what we should be trying to solve for.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this, when I sent this invite to both you and Senator Patton, who also represents Brooklyn, and you responded very quickly. Senator Patton also has, he's got some scheduling things going on, but I hope to, he's agreed to come on this podcast and kind of talk a little bit like we did today. So we're still working on some scheduling. And so I will say I'm very fortunate to have you as a representative for Brooklyn, because anytime I've invited you, you've responded, and that's all I can ask for as a superintendent. And I appreciate your how you represent us and how you communicate. Two more fun questions. So we took a tour of the district today. What stood out to you during the visit?
It's always fun to be near stage or on a stage that Elvis was on. But
right.
Look, it's just that a 10,000 or so person community. You're right. It's on the smaller side of communities and school districts, but you've made it work, and you're going to make it work. And even the elements of the school district that are older from original purposes built in the 1950s, you can see that there's been care, and that the floors are still in decent enough shape, and it's that care of community, that pride of community, that keeps things going. We can be real creative with spreadsheets as much as we want in Columbus and do everything that I hope for, but it takes actual people to do it. And you seem to have that in this community.
Yeah, we appreciate your partnership in this. Last question I have, and then I'll give some final thoughts to you. this was probably a unique invite for you, and I don't know if this is the first podcast you've done, but why did you feel like this was important for you to come out here and do this, visit with us, and really kind of, I don't want to say put yourself out there, but this is a unique experience. Why'd you decide to do this today?
So, not quite my first. The Brooklyn mayor beat.
Yeah, he did beat me. That's right. Yes, he did.
But he
credit to Mayor Van Kirk. I always give him credit. He started it. Yes.
Well, and I'll say this. Mayor Van Kirk is opposite party of me. But it's we get along great. We govern along, more importantly, great. I was able to work with him, understand what his needs were, get a couple $100,000 to go towards the recreation center here in Brooklyn. Yeah. Partly because of the conversation we had, that one-on-one and understanding what the needs were for the city. And I also was able to find, doing due diligence, that the city had been awarded some funds 10 years ago, but they weren't spent because a project fell through and nobody remembered that they were there.
Oh, wow.
But I went and looked and I found it, and I talked people in Columbus into giving the money over. Again, I think he appreciated that, but you learn, most of the best ideas you learn from either talking to people or meeting or just immersing yourself in it. And so to me, it's part of the job. My first time running, and I try not to be too political on this, I knocked on about 8,000 doors and had more than 5,000 conversations with people.
Right.
And that is how I don't watch NBC or Fox News to learn what people want. I go talk to them and hear about what they're really dealing with. And so again, there's a lot of households, the overwhelming majority of households don't have kids in the school districts, regardless of which community you talk about. Yeah. And you learn that they care about their community, they care about the kids. They've just been put in a situation where their bills are going up at a rate faster than they're able to make money. Mm-hmm. And so, how do you if you just look at an election result on a bond levy or a school levy and see yes or no, you don't hear the nuance, you don't feel the nuance. Yeah. And so that's a long-winded way of saying, you asked me to come. I am happy to have a conversation.
I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Any final thoughts?
I mentioned it right before we started this that I've got a Brooklyn 3D printed
that's right
hurricane on my desk in Columbus, and I will do my best to dispel the notion of every person who visits me that Brooklyn in fact is in Ohio and not in New York City.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk to that superintendent in North Olmsted to get you some Eagle gear or something Eagle for that desk. So. Yeah. State Rep Glassburn, it's been an amazing conversation. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and from our school district, we are lucky to have you representing us, and thank you for the time, and we will talk soon. Everybody, this has been Dr. Ted Caleris, Superintendent of Brooklyn City Schools, and the latest episode of the Hurricane Watch podcast with State Rep Chris Glassburn. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.